The first step of using divs for layout is I'm going to wipe out my working file, and I'm just going to start with a really clean slate. One of the things I recommend when beginning to experiment and play with layout is to take a lot of the elements you want to create and put them in a completely separate page. What I mean is create a page, call it columns.html, keep your style sheet or a new style sheet attached, because you really want to sort of, as you're troubleshooting in CSS, you want to sort of do it in a closed little environment. You notice in the previous sections, I was working one element at a time, and then we were adding layers and layers and layers on top. One of the things about troubleshooting with CSS is a lot of times if you do so much and you toss it in, you don't know where something went wrong. So what we want to do is little by little, layer on top, and as we layer and check against the browsers, every multiple window, again, we want to be really thorough. This is also about organizing your process. We want to be able to think about how we lay things out. And this is really, really critical, especially when we're getting to layout. Because if I do something wrong, things are going to fly off the rails really quickly. The first step of the layout is beginning to establish a flow of our page. One of the first things that I do is on a page design is I'm going to add a series of empty divs. I might use them all, but one of the things that I might do, and I've talked this exercise before, of if someone gives you flat artwork, sit there with a pen and draw boxes around everything. Imagine these boxes are our divs. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our divs and we're going to assign IDs against to them. And this is really, really, really the next important step. We might say ID equals, I don't know, a typical page element at the top might be a header. The next typical ID on the top might be a menu. An ID at the top. The second one might be a left column. And again, I'm not going to make columns yet. What I'm going to do is start experimenting with how these look like on the page. So of course I'm going to maybe do a right column. I might even put a footer. And maybe at the bottom, we'll maybe move this on top. This is starting a trend where we put contact info on top. I'm going to say ID equals contact. I might put a phone number there or something on the page. Again, really empty divs. I haven't done anything. I'm going to just put some really, really simple content in here. But before I do that, I'm going to double check that I'm right. I reload the page. It should be completely empty. But if I look under the covers with my inspector in Chrome, I'm going to see my beautiful little columns there. So we're going to close the inspector. I'm going to come back here. And now let's just put, a phone number 123, 123, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Of course, it's the 123 area code. The header is normally, I would maybe put a logo in there. The menu, I would say, link 1, link 2. Again, I've already got a menu that I could put in, but I don't want to integrate it in there yet. I might actually take the same attributes that I would have in my style guide and put those in. Remember, we created a really, really basic menu. We really like the look and feel of that. So we want to put that style in here. We would have already an idea of what our logo would be because, of course, we have the header one that we used. So I'm not really going to worry about the styling yet. I want us to worry about the layout. And this is really the important piece of this section, is adding these columns and adding these rows. I like to put a little really basic text just so I know what I'm expecting. And I also like to be really, really visual with myself, because as I'm working, I want to make sure that I have the right column that I'm looking at. There are a number of times that I'll tell you that I'll be working on something and I'll say, that's a great idea. What was I working on again? And so I want to make sure that I'm touching and editing code in the right one. So one of the important things, I might just copy these names here and delete it just for fun. I should have done this before, but now we're doing it together. People laugh at me when I do this at the first time because they think, well, that's kind of annoying. You're not making anything yet. The really important piece is the layout aspect of it. There's a lot of organizing work that goes into setting up a page for the first time. And this also gives me a chance to talk to you and tell you about what that process looks like. It really is a process of organizing your thoughts into legible layout. By legible layout, meaning if I left all these IDs in a file that anyone can work at, they should actually take a look at all these IDs. They should take a look at all these different sections and know exactly where I'm editing the code. In the next chapter, we're going to look at optimizing the code and how to actually start tuning things into specific areas and how to make things really beautiful. But I also want to make sure that one of the smaller, the typical mistakes is not adding brackets. I got all this work done. I come back here, I reload the page, and of course nothing happens because there's nothing in there. So why don't we use some background colors? This is always very helpful. And I might look like some Skittles here. So I'm going to do red, I'm going to do blue, I'm going to do yellow. Let's choose purple. I don't do white because then what's going to happen is you're not going to see anything. And let's do green. Again, it's going to look like a box of Skittles because it's going to have every color of the rainbow. But really the most important thing right now is getting this page nice and clean. I also, if you remember, have the padding in the global tags. So one of the things that we're going to do is let's take that padding out of there because I want to work on a really, really clean file. And I also want to start working and integrating the logo. We knew that we wanted to have a red line on top, so we might put that into one of our rows. So let's keep a lot of this stuff out here. I'll get rid of it. I'll keep the font size because we know that that's going to be consistent throughout, and the background color. So now I have this really ugly page that I'm starting to lay out, and this is really the beginning of adding columns. In this case, every div that we make gets stacked underneath the next div and underneath the next div and underneath the next div. And the reason that happens is if you look at the HTML code, they're literally going one after the other after the other. Divs actually always have a width of 100%. So as soon as you make a width of a div, it's nice and fluid. And it also is fluid to the top and the bottom. So before we wrap up, let's take a look at this. Let's open up in multiple browsers. Again, I saw my last version. It's looking pretty cool. Let's go back to Safari. Let's copy it in and reload the page. And now this is starting to look really not the most interesting, sexiest website in the world. Again, it looks like a pack of candy, but I'm beginning to add my layout. And let's look at next, I'm beginning to change this from a pack of candy stacked on top of each other that doesn't look like a real website to real things.